So let's have everybody introduce themselves just briefly, and we'll.
I'm Don Quirian with the Applicators Association.
I'm Alan Will. I'm a pastor of TaskRabbit, an independent freelancer in Seattle.
I'm Kelly Walter. I'm a marketing and communications consultant and executive speech writer.
Great. So let's have each of you talk a little bit about what got you into being part of this on-demand workforce. Do you want to start?
I was business. The recession kind of really less business, something else to fill in. I read an article in Weekly in summer 2013 about Lynn. Interesting. I checked it out, and right away it did very well. I'd say from September of 2013 until August 2014, it fit in very well. Then the way it has gotten really takes up much more of my time than it should be. I mean, it's become my full-time thing. Take a look at it. See if I'm trying to get it.
All right, Alan.
I got involved with TaskRabbit from Netflix. So I was unemployed. This is in 2009, 2010, and I saw a documentary. In a segment of the documentary, a gentleman was describing how he worked for TaskRabbit and did nothing but assembling IKEA furniture, and lived in a really awesome apartment in New York. And that kind of floored me that somebody could make a living off IKEA furniture, live in an upscale New York apartment. So, like one morning, I paused that documentary and I searched for TaskRabbit, and in about 45 minutes, I made $150 posting someone's eBay item. And so I've been tasking ever since. That's how I got involved.
Thanks, Alan.
So I worked at Microsoft for a lot of years, way too many years, and about 4.5 years ago, I was kind of at a point, I was doing executive communications and speech writing, and the executive staff that I was working for was kind of going through some turmoil, so it was a real good forcing function for me to evaluate what I wanted to do next in my career. And I looked around at all the opportunities inside Microsoft and outside Microsoft, and what I really wanted to do was change my lifestyle a little bit. I had 2 teenage daughters at the time, I'm a single mom, so I wanted to create more opportunities to spend time with them. I wanted to have more control over my time relative to money equation, like how much I work relative to how much I make, and I hadn't often felt that in my storied career at Microsoft. And the third thing I wanted was to be really deliberate about the kind of work that I did. There was certain types of work that I really loved doing, certain types of work that I didn't love doing, just to be able to manage that mix more. So I took the lead and left Microsoft and went out on my own. I still do a lot of my work with Microsoft, but I've been able to kind of achieve those 3 objectives that I have for my career.
So one of the things that is obviously different about this on-demand world is that you have to sell yourself either on a marketplace like Alan and Don, or into an organization like Kel does. And so let's hear a little bit about what the challenges of hunting for your paycheck are, either through these, specifically through one of the marketplaces, or in sort of the more open world that you're in, Kel. So let's start with Alan.
So I think one of the biggest challenges is actually breaking into the on-demand market because it's a peer-reviewed system. And so much like people are trying to overcome the Yelp problem, a lot of these marketplaces are peer-reviewed, so you're only being reviewed by your customer. And so the catch-22 of that is that trying to break into it, you have no peer review for reputation. And so you have to cast a wide net. You can also kind of be demeaning for it's going to niche out into a particular profession.
Great. Don, what about you?
Well, there's really not much challenge in the drivers. You pass your background check. Challenges, and that's the challenges that the system due to the way we're allowed to charge them.
led my business development in a totally old-fashioned way, which is just through, building and extending my network. There's a lot of, over the years of working at Microsoft, there's a huge amount of people that I got to know. I worked across the company, visions, and a lot of relationships. So a lot, I would say probably about 10% of this point, it was much higher when I started off doing this, of my time was just spent networking and talking to opportunities, certain needs, things like that, and figuring out how, where am I able to insert myself to add some value to our.
So beyond sales, there's obviously various challenges that are related to running your own 1099 or your own business. And so what are some of those challenges, whether it's accounting or insurance, what sort of is the top challenge for you as you go through figuring out all this world on your own?
So one of the biggest challenges for me has been the non-traditional nature of the employment relationship. So in the case of TaskRabbit, they pretty much say that they only facilitate contact between the worker and the client, and otherwise wash their hands of it. So in terms of liability or insuring yourself, this falls on the worker and not necessarily the marketplace that's facilitating that contact.
Makes sense. No?
Yeah, so I would say there's kind of three things I miss from working at a big company. One is just technology infrastructure. Like I've had to make friends with the Best Buy, blue shirts and figure out how to wire an office and do all of that kind of stuff, which wasn't necessarily my forte. Professional services, accounting, legal services, some of those types of things I've had to, build my own overhead in that regard, and then certainly healthcare, like the new Healthcare Act and the new going through Washington State to find my insurance, all the craziness associated with that has been eliminating, but it's, a much different motion than one thing.
Well, since I haven't been working with the company for many, many years, I've found the transition fairly easy. What I miss is there's very poor communication between drivers and administration. Issues come up on the ground, on the street. For example, one that's coming up a lot with drivers on Facebook pages. What do you do when you pull out and people pull out and they have children and no car seat? There's no policy. You're on the ground, I can deal with that. Okay, there's nobody to communicate with. You can send an email, don't get a response. A day later, and basically, you're going to be told, you're not even in the contract. Don't break the law, that's free. These things come up regularly on the street stuff, which these companies have not thought that they embark on what they're doing, which we encounter on a day-to-day. It's difficult to deal with. We're just there, no support at all. That, and then there's the whole insurance issue, which basically TNC drivers lie in their insurance. No, we're not. That's a fairly regular source of news that I use. Without the knowledge of all the
There's obviously a lot of undefined elements in this world, and Ellen, you can make a comment about it.
Yeah, and I think Don's touching on like a greater issue that a lot of on-demand workers are facing is that these contemporary structures don't have like any oversight or regulation that are normally incorporated in more traditional industries.
So these are some of the challenges that are faced by folks that are trying to figure out with these companies. Obviously, it's a collaborative enterprise in a lot of ways. Figure out, how is the law going to come down? How are workers going to continue to be able to feed their families and that sort of thing? In terms of consistency of income, what kind of opportunities have you been able to have by being able to work other work, or potentially challenges from not necessarily having a consistent paycheck?
Yeah, I think it's the trade-off that one makes when one steps into this lifestyle of, so I don't have to go to an office every day from 9 to 5, and I'm fighting off a big chunk of ambiguity in my source of income. It's worked well for me, but there's been moments where, I haven't had a full plate of work and I'm not sure where my next job's gonna come from. But again, for me, it's been just that reminder of I chose this specifically because I want that freedom, and that's a little bit
Similarly, I own a photography business, and so the greatest advantage of on-demand work is the flexibility for me to plug in additional income where I have time. So it's not like, oh, I'm off at 5, when can I do this? If I get a gig for like my lunch hour or something, I can just plug out and go add in additional income to more traditional revenue streams.
Yeah, flexibility certainly is nice, although my experience has been as the pay goes down, flexibility shrinks. So the flexibility factor isn't there that much anymore, which was the appeal initially. And yeah, I guess I find personally that I think I would rather trade some of my freedom for this.
So obviously getting a paycheck is important. One of the other items that we wanted to discuss is how you find community in these either marketplaces or when you're a solopreneur. Where are you going to get the sort of collegial environment that otherwise is provided by a workplace? Are there ways that you found to do that in your environments?
Not really. It's lived initially at for a while, social gatherings were enjoyable. That would tend to be the same 5 to 6 people we have these after a while. That gets kind of dull, and maybe one of them has to come. So that's definitely something that is missing from what I do. That there really is no community aspect of it at all, and that there's space to see
So let me ask, since, and all, are there services that the marketplaces could be providing to you to make you feel more connection with other people doing the work? So you can talk about how to get better at it, deliver a better experience, get higher ratings and so forth. Or are there financial services or otherwise that you'd like to see bundled with the opportunity to take a gig in a marketplace?
So I don't know if this is really something that is on the marketplace to provide, but for myself, I find that community value by working out of a co-working space here in Seattle. So if you're not familiar with Galvanize, Galvanize is one of 20 or so co-working spaces across Seattle. And it's kind of a new phenomenon everywhere is having independent workers or small businessmen come together in an office-like environment, community or networking value. So I've been working out of co-working space to supplement what you might normally find in an office.
What about you, Kelly?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure, to Alan's point, I'm not sure, I feel it's incumbent on the marketplace to provide this to me, but there is a need and a desire that I have to connect, not only with people that are doing similar work that I do from a networking standpoint, but just other on-demand workers, understand how they're navigating it, what things that, the thing that you miss from being in an office and standing around and chatting with people is just clever ways to get things done, resources that are available to you. So I do miss that. I actually don't miss being in an office every day. I spend a ton of time on my phone, in front of my computer, talking to people, so I get that hit of human connection, not in a face-to-face kind of way, but it's enough to kind of beat me. But yeah, getting that kind of inside information, stories, things like that that are both interesting and useful and energizing. I would love to see more of that, come about in an organic way, like what we're talking about.
Great. So let's take a couple of questions from the audience. We have a microphone there.
So I have a question for Don and a question for Ellen. The question for Don is, you mentioned that the communication is a little difficult with the admins. How would you imagine they could improve that? Is it from lack of technology or is it lack of response?
It's lack of response. I mean, I believe that these companies, they really don't want to have employees. That's their goal. Their autonomous car is the eventual goal. But even given with the administration, right, they really don't want to have, let's say, an HR department, which they really have. I mean, they employ tens of thousands of human beings who are giving rise to other beings. There's a lot of human interactions going on here. And there needs to be things for the change. there's something very serious, I can call someone. Now, let initially did that, you can do that, and then they stop doing this. I mean, I think that there is a kind of denial now about these companies that they want it so bad and they have no employees that they don't want it to happen now when they have to pull homes. And these certain serious issues that are happening on the street with human beings in our transportation situations.
And the second question, this is actually for Gal and Ellen. Have you guys ever worked, I understand, TaskRabbit is really for tasks to serve other consumers, at least most of them. Have you actually worked for any, on any tasks that serve businesses? If that makes sense.
Yeah, so my clientele is a mix of stay-at-home moms to tech firms here in Seattle. So it's a wide range, absolutely.
Yeah, my clients are exclusively business clients.
And how do you compare, serving consumers versus businesses? Experience-wise, do they differ?
Between like other businesses or corporations, it's what you would expect interfacing with another business as an independent contractor. But I think when you're working with other consumers, they face as much confusion as we do as workers about how the process works, what's deliverable, how you're getting paid. So there's like a lack of information about how the culture of on-demand economy works.
Let's get a couple more questions.
Hi, my name is Brendan. I just have a quick question for really everybody on the panel. Perhaps maybe you can mind answering first. It seems like the companies are in a catch-22 around the laws. I'm not a labor law expert around what the role of an independent contractor is. Would any of you advocate for a change in labor laws and the definition of an independent contractor? Because I think companies feel like they may be hesitant to provide the types of services that you might normally expect in an employee relationship for tripping up the laws and potentially being sued, et cetera. I don't know if anyone has an opinion on that or would advocate for some change in that status.
I feel that I'm an employee. I mean, I can choose what hours I work, the freedom ends there. Everything else is dictated. So I'm an employee. My fear would be if it is determined I'm an employee, I will be more like, it's kind of a Costco Walmart analogy. I'm afraid I'd be a Walmart employee as opposed to a Costco employee. So I have reservations about it. But I do believe that I am an employee as far as the amount of control that the company has.
One second. I actually have a huge opinion about this just because Microsoft is still a huge part of my client base. Microsoft in the 90s went through and lost a lawsuit against independent contractors who worked there year after year and basically they paid as employees. So they sued the company and Microsoft lost. Consequently, over the last 2 years, they've changed a lot of their contractor policies and requirements just to protect themselves from another lawsuit. So if there was legislation that said there's a designation of an independent contractor, regardless of how you behave in the environment, you're designated that way, you're an independent contractor, I think that would be beneficial in my context. I'm not sure, I'm not thinking broadly about negative impacts that might have a different context, but for me personally, that would be a very positive thing. Because I don't think about myself as an employee anymore. I think of myself as I work for myself, I have clients, I run my own business, so I would appreciate that.
So I definitely consider myself an independent contractor in the context of on-demand marketplaces. However, we're kind of held in a strange limbo because that's how the marketplaces regard us, but at the same time, specifically with TaskRabbit, they don't allow you to subcontract. So there's basically like an uncontracted work position, which is like as a freelancer.
That's kind of like a trigger right there, right?
Absolutely. And so it's like a weird limbo, and they don't allow you to move any of the relationship, off base essentially. And so it can be kind of hazardous to navigate in terms of liabilities or recourse if your client is upset. Usually I've dealt with 2 clients that have gone nuclear, and there's no support from the marketplace. You call them and they say, well, we just facilitate the contact between you two, the rest is up to you, yet at the same time they don't allow you to ensure your safety through subcontract.
Oh, sure, one more comment.
Yeah, I'd like to add, it's my hope that like the Outfaced Drivers Association will be able to address these issues with the collective bargaining law that's passed in December, that we can maintain status as independent contractors who then have rights. I think that may be the best way to address this. Because I think most drivers I talk to, we don't really want to become employees. The independent contracting situation is attractive, but it's stifling right at the moment. And it's a hope that the collective bargaining law will clear this up.
It seems like some of the companies, and I'm observing this from afar, would like to perhaps provide some of the support that you mentioned and others, but they're stifled as well. So I agree, it seems like there should be some legislation or something that can remedy this situation.
Everyone's afraid to take things first. But I think Seattle's taking first.
So, I know, Don, you bought a car in order to drive. Do you write that off as a business expense? How do you treat that as an expense?
That's right.
And I think we've got time for one more question as well.
I was wondering, as there's conferences and talks in New York City about worker cooperatives replacing businesses that are facilitating the tasker or the driver relationship, would you, if there was a equally good worker cooperative that you could be gaining clients through, would you switch to that instead of working for a corporation? Would it be a compelling offer?
I would certainly consider it.
Alan, what about you?
Sure. I think you're kind of touching on a greater issue of like, what is the union like do? We're talking about like relationships between workers and then who they're working for. I think you're talking about like readdressing not only like how workers work for their clients, but how we're working with each other as well as competition.
Well, my situation is similar to that right now. I work in one context. I work with a group of people that does similar things to me. They are my back-end infrastructure for billing and things like that, with Microsoft specifically. So it's kind of touching on that. It's not exactly that, and it works well. It works well. I'm not as, I haven't been as thoughtful about the types of issues like unions and things like that, so I don't really know how to talk about that.
Well, a lot of these dilemmas are going to need to get figured out in the next 5 years, and hopefully a lot of these people in the room are going to be part of it. It is really related to some of the human challenges that we were talking about on the panel before, and so these are issues that we need to remain engaged with, and thanks to our panelists, and thanks for the questions.